July 20th, 1944, the skies over Germany, 28 victories. Francis Stanley Gabreski, known to everyone as Gabby, was flying his 52nd combat mission in his beloved P-47 Thunderbolt. He had survived more dogfights than almost any American pilot in Europe. He knew the secrets, he had mastered the machine. But on this summer morning, everything he had learned was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. Gabby dove low, chasing a German fighter across an enemy airfield. His propeller caught the ground just barely. A kiss of metal against Earth at 300 miles per hour. The massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, all 7 tons of it, shuddered violently. Gabby fought the controls as the aircraft lurched and bucked. He managed to nurse it back into the air, but the engine was dying. Black smoke poured from the cowling. He had seconds to decide. Bail out over enemy territory or try to land. He chose to land. The Thunderbolt hit the ground hard and skidded across a German field. Gabby climbed out, dazed but alive. Within minutes, Wehrmacht soldiers surrounded him. America's top ace, the man who had shot down 28 German aircraft, was now a prisoner of war. He would spend the next 10 months in Stalag Luft 1, a POW camp on the Baltic coast. But this wasn't where Gabby Gabreski's story began. He was born February 28th, 1919, in Oil City, Pennsylvania. His parents were Polish immigrants. His father worked in the oil refineries. Hard physical labor that left his hands scarred and his back bent. The family name was Gabreski. Francis shortened it, made it easier for Americans to pronounce Gabby. The nickname stuck because he talked constantly. As a boy, he chatted about everything, airplanes especially. He built model planes in his bedroom, hung them from the ceiling with fishing line. His mother would stand in the doorway, watching him, wondering where this obsession came from. In 1937, Gabby enrolled at Notre Dame University. He wanted to study engineering, wanted to understand how things flew, but after 2 years, he left. Notre Dame didn't have a flight training program, and Gabby needed to fly. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps in 1940. His timing was either perfect or terrible, depending on how you looked at it. War was coming. Everyone knew it. The Army sent him to flight school. He learned to fly in a Stearman biplane, an open cockpit trainer that rattled and shook in even mild turbulence. His first instructor was a man named Captain Howard, a veteran from the last war, who had flown over France in 1918. Howard told Gabby something he never forgot. The airplane doesn't care about your courage, son. It only cares if you understand it. Respect the machine and it will bring you home. After earning his wings in March 1941, Gabby was assigned to the 45th Pursuit Squadron in Hawaii. He was there on December 7th, 1941, Wheeler Field. He watched the Japanese planes come in low over the mountains that Sunday morning. He was running toward his aircraft when the first bombs hit. The explosions threw him to the ground. Burning aviation fuel spread across the flight line like liquid fire. He couldn't reach his plane. He could only watch as the Japanese Zeros strafed the parked American fighters, destroying them one by one. The feeling of helplessness, of being unable to fight back, burned deeper than any fire. After Pearl Harbor, Gabby volunteered for everything. He wanted combat duty. He wanted another chance. In early 1943, his chance came. The Army Air Forces sent him to England to join the 56th Fighter Group, the first unit equipped with the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. When Gabby first saw the P-47, he thought there had been a mistake. The aircraft was enormous. nearly 14 feet tall, weighing over 7 tons fully loaded. It looked like a milk jug with wings, squat and round and impossibly heavy. The British pilots at the airfield laughed. They called it the 7-ton milk truck. They said it was too heavy to dogfight, too slow to catch the sleek German Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs. Gabby's squadron commander was Colonel Hubert Zemke, a brilliant tactician who understood something other pilots missed. The P-47 wasn't built to turn with German fighters. It was built to hit them and survive. Zemke gathered his pilots in a briefing room at Horsham St. Faith Airfield in January 1943. He stood at the front with a piece of chalk and drew diagrams on a blackboard. "Listen carefully," he said. "The Germans have been fighting for 3 years. They are skilled. Their aircraft are nimble. If you try to turn with a Messerschmitt, you will die. But we have advantages. We have altitude. We have speed. We have armor. We will fight on our terms, not theirs." Zemke taught them energy tactics. Dive from high altitude. Build speed. Hit the enemy hard if they turn to fight. Keep your speed. Extend away. Climb back up. And come again. Never slow down. Never try to maneuver with them at low speed. The P-47 was a heavy fighter with an 18-cylinder radial engine producing over 2,000 horsepower. In a dive, it was one of the fastest aircraft in the sky, and it could take punishment that would destroy any other fighter. Gabby flew his first combat mission over France in March 1943. He saw German fighters but didn't engage them. He was learning, watching. On his 7th mission, April 8, 1943, he got his first victory. A Focke-Wulf 190 came up from below, attacking a formation of B-17 bombers. Gabby dove on him from above. He closed to 300 yards, then 200. He could see the black crosses on the Germans' wings. He pressed the trigger. 8 50 caliber machine guns roared. The Focke-Wulf exploded, just exploded. One moment it was there, solid and real. The next moment it was pieces tumbling through the sky, trailing smoke. Gabby flew through the debris field. Fragments of metal pinged off his armored windscreen. He felt sick. He had just killed a man. Maybe the pilot bailed out, maybe not. Gabby never saw a parachute. That night in the officers' quarters, he couldn't eat dinner. Another pilot, Lieutenant Walker Mahurin, sat down next to him. Mahurin had been in combat longer. "First one is always hard," Mahurin said quietly. "You don't forget it, but you learn to keep flying. You learn that they are trying to kill you just as hard. You learn that the bombers you protect carry 10 men each, and if the German fighters get through, those men die. You learn to focus on the mission." Gabby learned. He flew mission after mission through the spring and summer of 1943. By August, he had shot down 9 German aircraft. He was becoming an ace, but more importantly, he was learning the secrets of survival. The first secret was altitude. Always take off early. Always climb higher than the enemy expects. The P-47 had a turbo supercharger that let it operate effectively above 30,000 feet, higher than most German fighters like to go. Up there, the air was thin and cold. The pilots needed oxygen masks. The temperature dropped to 40 or 50 degrees below zero, but altitude was safety. Altitude was potential energy waiting to be converted into speed. The second secret was awareness. Gabby developed what pilots called a swivel neck. He constantly scanned the sky. Most pilots who died never saw what hit them. A German fighter would come out of the sun, out of a cloud, out of a blind spot below and behind. One quick burst of cannon fire, and it was over. Gabby learned to look everywhere, constantly, obsessively. He trained himself to see the tiny specks against the sky, to identify them instantly, friend or enemy, above or below, closing or opening. His wingman, Captain Bob Johnson, later said that flying with Gabby was like flying with a man who had eyes in the back of his head. The third secret was discipline. Never chase a single enemy deep into hostile territory. Never leave your wingman. Never get so focused on one target that you forget the rest of the sky. German pilots were masters of the trap. One fighter would act as bait, drawing Americans down and away from their formations. Then his friends would pounce from above. Gabby saw it happen. He saw eager young pilots break formation to chase a lone Messerschmitt, only to get jumped by four more. He learned to resist the temptation. He learned patience. The fourth secret was the machine itself. Gabby spent hours learning every detail of the P-47. He talked to the crew chiefs, the mechanics who maintained the aircraft. He learned where the armor plates were positioned. Behind the pilot's seat, a thick steel plate. Behind the engine, more armor. Protecting the oil cooler. Protecting the fuel tanks. The P-47 could absorb incredible damage. Pilots brought them home with cylinders shot out, with holes the size of basketballs in the wings, with hydraulics destroyed and landing gear jammed. The aircraft was forgiving. It wanted to bring you home. Gabby also learned the engine, the Pratt and Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows. He learned its sounds, its vibrations. He could tell by the sound if something was wrong. A slight roughness meant magneto trouble. A change in pitch meant propeller governor problems. He learned to manage the engine temperatures, to lean the fuel mixture at altitude, to use the turbo supercharger efficiently. The pilots who understood their machines survived. The pilots who just got in and flew eventually made fatal mistakes. By November 1943, Gabby had 15 confirmed victories. He was becoming famous. War correspondents interviewed him. His picture appeared in newspapers back home, but he remained focused on the mission. He knew that fame in combat was dangerous. It made you feel invincible. It made you take risks. He saw it happen to other pilots. They got confident. They got aggressive. They stopped following the rules, and they died. On November 26th, 1943, Gabby was leading a formation of P-47s escorting B-17 bombers to Bremen. The German fighters came up in force. Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, more than 50 of them. Gabby's radio crackled with urgent calls. Bandits high, bandits diving, the sky filled with tracer fire and burning aircraft. Gabby saw a Messerschmitt diving on a damaged B-17. He rolled inverted and pulled through, diving almost vertically. The P-47 accelerated. 400 miles per hour, 450, 500. The controls stiffened. The wings flexed. He lined up the Messerschmitt in his gun sight and fired a long burst. The German fighter came apart. Pieces of wing spun away. The pilot bailed out. Gabby pulled out of the dive. His airspeed was over 500 miles per hour. The forces pressed him into his seat. His vision grayed at the edges. He relaxed the back pressure on the stick, and the P-47 gradually leveled off. He looked around. The dogfight had spread across 50 miles of sky. Parachutes dotted the air, both American and German. Burning aircraft spiraled down. Gabby counted his fuel. He had enough to get home. Barely. He called his flight. 2 of his 4 aircraft answered. One pilot was dead. Another had to bail out over the English Channel. and was picked up by a rescue boat later that day. The missions continued through the winter, December, January, February 1944. Gabby's score climbed 20 victories, 25. He developed routines, superstitions. He always wore the same leather jacket, same scarf. He always checked his aircraft personally before every mission, running his hand along the fuselage looking for damage the ground crew might have missed. He always said a prayer before takeoff, not a long prayer, just a simple request. Let me see my family again. In March 1944, the 8th Air Force began flying missions deep into Germany, Berlin, Munich, Regensburg. The distances were enormous. 7 hours in the cockpit, 7 hours of cold, 7 hours of high altitude where any mistake, any mechanical failure, any hit from enemy fire could be fatal. Gabby flew these missions in a P-47 he named Dawn Patrol. The name was painted on the nose, along with 27 little swastikas, one for each victory. On one of these long missions, April 5th, 1944, Gabby's flight encountered a new German tactic. The Luftwaffe had formed special squadrons of heavily armed and armored Focke-Wulf 190s specifically to attack the bomber formation. These fighters carried extra cannons and armor plating. They were slower than standard fighters, but could withstand hits from the bomber's defensive guns. Gabby watched one of these heavily armed 190s make a head-on attack against a B-17. The German pilot flew straight into the bomber's nose guns, firing continuously. The B-17's nose section exploded. The bomber fell away out of control. The German fighter, damaged but still flying, turned for another attack. Gabby went after him. He closed to point-blank range, less than 200 yards. He fired. His 8 machine guns put out a combined rate of fire of nearly 100 rounds per second. The stream of 50 caliber bullets walked up the fuselage of the Focke-Wulf. The German fighter staggered, pieces flying off, but it didn't explode. The armor protected it. Gabby fired again. This time, he aimed for the wings, the thin wings where there was no armor. His bullets shredded the wing structure. The Focke-Wulf rolled violently and spun down, trailing smoke and fuel. Victory number 25. But Gabby was learning something disturbing. The quality of German pilots was changing. Early in the war, the average Luftwaffe fighter pilot had hundreds of hours of training. By 1944, Germany was running out of experienced pilots. The replacements were younger, less trained. Some had less than 50 hours in their aircraft before being thrown into combat. Gabby could tell the difference. The experienced pilots were smooth, efficient, dangerous. The inexperienced pilots were erratic, unpredictable, often fatal to themselves and others. Gabby found himself in odd situations. Sometimes an inexperienced German would fly straight and level for seconds at a time, seemingly unaware that he was under attack. Other times, they would maneuver desperately but without pattern, making wild, uncoordinated turns that bled away their energy and left them helpless. It bothered Gabby. These were boys, teenagers, some of them sent up in aircraft they barely knew how to fly. They never had a chance, but they kept coming. Germany was burning through pilots at an unsustainable rate. The Luftwaffe was dying in the air over Germany. One unequal combat at a time. By June 1944, Gabby had 28 confirmed victories. He was the top-scoring American ace in Europe. Only Bob Johnson with 27 was close. The two men were friends and rivals. They pushed each other. Who would be first to 30 victories? The newspapers back home followed the race. But Gabby knew something the newspapers didn't. He was exhausted. He had flown 51 combat missions. He had been in the air during some of the most savage fighting of the war. He had seen friends die. He had killed perhaps 30 men himself, probably more. The confirmed victories were just the aircraft he had definitely destroyed. There were others, probables and damaged, that probably went down as well. The stress was accumulating. Gabby noticed his hands shaking sometimes. He had trouble sleeping. When he did sleep, he dreamed of falling aircraft, of fire, of the faces of German pilots. In the instant before impact, the flight surgeon noticed. He called Gabby in for an examination. "You need a rest," the doctor said. "You've done enough. Take a month off. Go back to the States. See your family." Gabby refused. "Just a few more missions," he said. "Just a few more." July 20th, 1944. The mission was a fighter sweep over Germany. Free hunting. No bombers to escort. Just fighters looking for targets of opportunity. Gabby led his flight across the German border. They spotted an enemy airfield. Gabby saw a German fighter taking off. He dove to attack. This is where the accounts diverge. In his official report, Gabby said he misjudged his altitude and his propeller struck the ground. In later interviews, he suggested his aircraft might have been hit by ground fire, causing a sudden loss of altitude. Either way, the result was the same. The propeller tips bent. The engine shook itself apart. Gabby crashed. He was captured immediately. The German soldiers were surprisingly courteous. They knew who he had. One officer spoke English. "Herr Major Gabreski," he said, "you have caused us much trouble." Gabby said nothing. The Germans took him to a Luftwaffe base for interrogation. The interrogator was a colonel, a former fighter pilot himself. He knew Gabby's record. He knew the 56th Fighter Group. He asked questions about tactics, about aircraft performance, about radio frequencies. Gabby gave only his name, rank, and serial number. The colonel smiled. "It doesn't matter," he said. "The war is already lost. We know this, but we fight on anyway. What else can we do?" They sent Gabby to Stalag Luft 1, a prisoner of war camp on the Baltic coast near Bath. The camp held mostly Allied airmen, British and American pilots, navigators, bombardiers, men who had been shot down over Germany. The camp was surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. The conditions were harsh. The food was minimal. Red Cross parcels supplemented their diet, but they were always hungry. The winter of 1944 to 1945 was brutal. The barracks had no heat. The prisoners slept under thin blankets, sometimes 2 or 3 men sharing body heat to survive the night. But Gabby was alive. That was the important thing. He was alive while the war ground on without him. He heard news from new prisoners arriving. The Allies had landed in Normandy. Paris was liberated. The Russians were advancing from the east. Germany was being crushed between 2 massive armies. It was only a matter of time. In the camp, Gabby met other prisoners who had been shot down by the same German pilots he had fought. They compared notes. They talked about tactics. One British pilot told Gabby about being shot down by a German ace named Heinz Bear. The German had killed his entire crew except for him. But before he bailed out, the British pilot saw Bear's Focke-Wulf take hits from the bomber's gunners. He always wondered if Bear made it home. Gabby told him that Bear had indeed survived and was still flying. These conversations were surreal. Men discussing the Germans who had tried to kill them as if talking about opponents in a sporting match. The months in Stalag Luft 1 changed Gabby. He had time to think, time to process everything he had experienced. He realized how lucky he had been. 28 victories meant at least 28 combats where he could have died. How many other combats had he been in? Hundreds. Any one of them could have ended differently. A bullet 6 inches to the left, a moment of inattention, a mechanical failure at the wrong time. Survival in combat was not just skill. It was not just knowledge. It was luck. Random, inexplicable luck. Some of the best pilots he knew were dead. Some of the mediocre pilots survived. There was no justice in it. In late April 1945, the prisoners heard artillery fire. The Russians were close. The German guards were nervous. There were rumors they might shoot the prisoners rather than let them be liberated. But the camp commandant was a decent man. On May 1st, 1945, he surrendered the camp to advancing Russian forces. Gabby and the other prisoners were free. The trip home took weeks. The Russians handed them over to American forces. They were debriefed, examined, processed. Gabby weighed 30 pounds less than when he had been captured, but he was intact. He was whole. On May 29, 1945, he arrived in New York Harbor aboard a transport ship. His family was there. His mother cried. His father, the old refinery worker with the scarred hands, hugged him and said nothing, just held him. The war in Europe was over. Germany had surrendered on May 8th. Japan would surrender in August after the atomic bombs. Gabby Gabreski was a hero. The newspapers wanted interviews. The army wanted him to go on a publicity tour. He did some of it, but his heart wasn't in it. He had seen too much. He knew too much about the reality of combat to enjoy being celebrated for it. But Gabby wasn't done flying. The Army Air Forces became the United States Air Force in 1947, and Gabby stayed in. He flew jets now, F-80 Shooting Stars, F-86 Sabres. When the Korean War started in 1950, Gabby volunteered for combat duty. He was 31 years old, ancient by fighter pilot standards, but he wanted to fly. In Korea, he shot down 6.5 MiG-15s, making him one of only 7 pilots to become an ace in 2 wars. His final tally, 34.5 confirmed victories, 31 from World War II, including the 3 he was credited with after the war based on gun camera evidence, 6.5 from Korea. He retired from the Air Force in 1967 as a colonel. He settled in New York. He worked in the aerospace industry. He gave speeches. He attended reunions of the 56th Fighter Group. The men who had survived would gather and remember the men who hadn't. They would tell stories about missions from 20 years ago, then 30, then 40. The stories became smoother with each telling. The edges worn down, the terror transformed into adventure. In interviews late in his life, Gabby was asked about his secrets of survival. How had he done it? How had he survived 52 combat missions in World War II and 146 missions in Korea? He always gave the same answers. Know your aircraft. Master your machine. Never stop learning. Never get overconfident. Always scan the sky. Stay with your wingman. Climb high. Use your altitude. Fight on your terms. And luck. He always mentioned luck. But there was something else. Something he rarely talked about. It was the memory of Pearl Harbor. The memory of running toward his aircraft and not being able to reach it. The memory of helplessness. That memory drove him. It drove him to train harder, to learn more, to be better. He never wanted to feel helpless again. Every victory, every mission survived was an answer to that terrible morning in December 1941. Gabby Gabreski died on January 31st, 2002. He was 83 years old. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Old pilots with shaking hands and fading eyesight. Younger pilots who knew him only by reputation. His wife Kay, his children and grandchildren. The ceremony included a missing man formation. 4 F-16 fighters flew over in close formation. Then one drew aircraft, pulled up and away, leaving a gap in the formation. The empty space in the sky, the silence where a wingman should be. Today, the P-47 Thunderbolt is remembered as one of the great fighters of World War II. It was not the fastest. It was not the most maneuverable, but it was tough. It brought its pilots home. More than 15,000 P-47s were built. They flew missions in every theater of the war. They destroyed thousands of enemy aircraft, and they kept pilots like Gabby Gabreski alive long enough to learn the skills that would make them aces. The lessons Gabby learned are still taught today. Know your machine, master your tactics, never stop scanning, use your advantages, fight smart, not just hard. These principles are timeless. They applied in 1944, they applied in 1951, they apply today to pilots flying aircraft that would seem like science fiction to Gabby's generation. But the fundamental truths remain. Skill matters, knowledge matters, discipline matters, and sometimes, despite everything, luck matters most of all. Gabby Gabreski's story is the story of learning to survive in the most dangerous environment humans had created. The sky over Germany in 1943 and 1944 was a killing field. Thousands of airmen died there. The odds of surviving a full tour of combat missions were poor, but some men figured it out. They learned the secrets. They mastered their fear. They made it home. Gabby was one of them. He was one of the lucky ones. He knew it, and he never forgot it.